I found my sister's diary and discovered we're clones in a government experiment. Reddit stories. I found my sister's diary and discovered we're clones in a government experiment. Reddit stories. Before I tell you what happened, you need to understand something about our family. From the outside, we looked flawless, like a picture on the front of a suburban home magazine. Mom was always dressed in neat, tailored outfits, the kind that made her look like she had just stepped off a plane from a business trip in Paris. Dad had that calm, quiet strength that made everyone trust him immediately. And my sister, Ella, she was the golden child, the kind of girl who got straight A's, won gymnastics medals, and never forgot to say thank you, even when things went wrong. And me, I was the younger brother, invisible most of the time, the background character in our polished little storybook life. But every family has shadows behind the curtains, and ours ran darker than I ever imagined. We grew up in a house with gleaming hardwood floors, the smell of fresh, baked bread constantly floating through the air, and a backyard just big enough to forget the neighbors. Our walls were covered with pictures. Vacations, birthdays, holidays. Moments frozen in smiling perfection. But behind every photograph was something unspoken. Tension, secrets, silence. And I never questioned it because I had no reason to. Until I found Ella's diary. It wasn't like I was snooping. At least, not at first. She had left it on her bed one afternoon while rushing out for a sleepover, its purple cover peeking out from under a crumpled hoodie. I was in her room looking for the charger she'd borrowed from me. That was my only intention. But curiosity is a seductive thing. You tell yourself it's harmless. Just a glance. Just the first page. Then suddenly you're 30 pages deep and the words are seared into your memory like a brand. The first few entries were innocent enough. School drama, crushes, fights with friends. The kind of stuff you expect from a 16-year-old girl. But then the tone shifted. The handwriting became erratic, the entries more scattered. There were whole paragraphs written in capital letters and others so messy they looked like they'd been scribbled while crying. That's when I started reading slower, more carefully. That's when I started feeling sick. Ella wrote about the room. That's what she called it. At first, I thought it was just metaphorical, a teenage way of talking about feeling trapped or isolated. But the entries became more detailed. She described it as an actual place, a room in our house, one that she had only seen once, but one that haunted her in dreams and flashbacks. She said our parents had taken her there when she was 8, that there had been a chair, and someone else inside, someone she didn't know. I wanted to stop reading, but I couldn't. My hands kept turning the pages like they weren't mine. She mentioned whispers she used to hear at night, muffled conversations through the vents, the way Mom's smile would drop for a split second when certain names came up. Names I didn't recognize. Jamara? Unit 6? And then came the worst part. She wrote that sometimes she thought I wasn't really her brother. That maybe I was part of Teat too. That Mom and Dad had plans for me the same way they once had for her. I remember closing the diary and just sitting there. The room felt colder, like a window had been left open even though it was the middle of July. Everything in the house seemed different. The pictures on the walls looked staged. The furniture too symmetrical. Even the sound of the wind outside took on a strange, unnatural rhythm. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I kept seeing the words etched in my mind, especially the last line of the most recent entry. If anything ever happens to me, don't trust them. Find the trapdoor under the stairs. That's where it starts. I thought it was just paranoia, teenage drama amplified by too many late-night horror movies. But the next day, when Ella didn't come home from her sleepover, something inside me shifted. Mom said she'd decided to stay an extra night, that she was having too much fun to come home just yet. But when I called her friend's house, they said Ella had never made it there. It was like a glass wall had shattered between me and the world. I suddenly saw through the cracks. Mom wasn't pacing in worry, she was too calm. Dad wasn't making phone calls to the police. He was waiting to see if she came back on her own. It didn't make sense. None of it did, but I couldn't confront them. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed to find out what was behind that trapdoor. Our house was old enough to have secrets. Creaky floorboards, hidden corners, locked cabinets with keys that had long since disappeared. But I knew every inch of it. At least I thought I did. That's what made Ella's message so terrifying. I had never seen a trapdoor under the stairs. Not once. But now I looked. I spent the entire night tapping on the wooden panels with the handle of a screwdriver, listening for that hollow sound. And then I found it. It was covered with a thin layer of matching paneling, expertly painted to blend into the wall. If you weren't looking for it, you'd never know it was there. My hands were trembling as I pried it open. It wasn't a full-sized door, more like a hatch. Behind it, a narrow tunnel led downward into the darkness, the air thick with the smell of dust, mildew, and something else. Something metallic and sharp. I didn't tell anyone. I waited until Mom and Dad had left for their morning walk. Something they never used to do until last week. I crawled through the tunnel with a flashlight between my teeth and Ella's diary in my pocket. Every movement echoed. Every breath sounded like a scream. I expected to find an old storage room, maybe some forgotten holiday decorations or broken furniture. But I found a corridor. A real corridor. With smooth concrete walls and a door at the end. The kind of door that doesn't belong in a house. The kind with reinforced hinges and no handle on the inside. It was open. Just slightly. Enough for the beam of my flashlight to slip through and catch something silver. It was a chair. Bolted to the floor. Straps on the armrests. I turned around and vomited right there on the cold concrete. That's when I knew Ella hadn't imagined it. The room was real. And my parents had lied about everything. But the worst part wasn't the chair. It wasn't the syringes in the corner, or the metal cabinets filled with files labeled with codes and numbers. It was the photographs taped to the wall behind the chair. They were of children. Lots of them. Some of the pictures were faded, like they had been there for years. Some were recent. One was of me, smiling, standing in our backyard, with a date scrawled underneath, next month. I stumbled backward and sprinted out of that place, slamming the trapdoor shut and covering it like nothing had ever happened. My parents came back 15 minutes later, smiling, acting normal, like I didn't just see what I saw, like they weren't planning something. Now I had to play along, act like I hadn't read the diary, like I didn't know about the room, about the files, about the photo, because I needed time. I needed to find Ella. I needed to know the truth about who we really were, and what my parents were hiding. Because suddenly, I wasn't sure they were my parents at all. The next few days were a performance. Every smile I gave was fake. Every good morning, a line from a script I was rewriting in real time. I couldn't afford to show fear, not until I understood the scale of what I'd stumbled into. Ella was still missing. My parents, if I could even call them that anymore, kept insisting she was probably just off being a teenager, as if kids routinely vanish without taking their phones, backpacks, or saying goodbye. But the worst part? No police report. No missing poster. No calls to her friends. It was like Ella had never existed. So I played dumb, ate my cereal, did my homework, nodded at their stories. But inside, my thoughts were spiraling. That corridor, the metal chair, the pictures on the wall. It wasn't just twisted. It was calculated. Someone built that room for a purpose, a long-term one. And the photo of me, with a future date scrawled underneath, had been the loudest clue. Whatever they had planned for Ella, they were planning for me next. I waited until they were asleep to go back down. This time I brought gloves, my phone, and a crowbar I'd hidden in the garage. The trapdoor creaked louder than I remembered, like it knew I was coming. Every part of me screamed not to go, but I needed answers. Not guesses, not fears. Truth. I moved fast. Past the tunnel, down the corridor, straight to the filing cabinets. There were 3 of them, thick and dented like they'd been dragged from a military base. I started pulling open drawers, flipping through folders labeled with barcodes and symbols. At first, it was a mess. Medical charts, strange diagrams of the human brain, test results in some kind of code. Then I found a folder labeled with my date of birth. Except it wasn't just my name at the top. It was Subject 42A. Inside were records I'd never seen before. A birth certificate, fake. A vaccination record, fabricated. Even the school transcripts I thought were mine had discrepancies, wrong teachers, classes I never took, grades I never earned. And stapled to the back of it all, a DNA test. 2 columns, one marked Subject 42A, the other host pair 7. The result, no biological relation. I dropped the folder. My whole body went cold. They weren't my parents, not even close. Every Christmas, every birthday, every scraped knee they bandaged, it was all a lie. An experiment. That's when I saw the chart. It was pinned to the wall beside the chair. A schedule, names, dates, stages. I traced my finger down the list and found Ella. Subject 41B. Her status, fees incomplete. Containment breach? A containment breach, like she'd escaped something, or someone. And beneath her name, mine, Subject 42A. Phase to begin, April 14. That was 11 days from now. 11 days until whatever they did to Ella, they'd do to me. I staggered out, barely remembering to seal the hatch behind me. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't even hold my phone straight to take pictures. I needed help. But who would believe me? If I called the police, they'd come and talk to Mom and Dad. And Mom and Dad were experts at pretending. So I did the only thing I could think of. I searched for Ella's real friends. Not the ones our parents knew about, the ones she'd mentioned in her diary. There were nicknames: M, Lilacat, Ghostfire. I took a chance and searched Instagram, Reddit, anywhere usernames like those might exist. And after hours of digging, I found a burner Reddit account that posted under the name Ghostfire199. The profile was empty except for one post made 4 days ago. It read, "If you're reading this, I got out. I have 72 hours before they track me. Meet me where the sky touches the water midnight. Bring the diary. Don't bring your phone." There was no location, no date, just that cryptic message. But I knew what it meant. Here the sky touches the water. It was a phrase Ella used when we were younger. Our secret code for the old dock by Willow Lake, a place our parents never took us. A place they hated for some reason. I didn't understand why, but it was our safe space when we were kids. I had to go. I left my phone behind and stole out at 11:30 p.m., the diary in my jacket. My bike tires made almost no sound on the empty streets, the moon full above me. Every shadow looked like it could reach out and grab me. When I got to the dock, the lake was still, silent, empty. Then I saw her. She stepped out from behind the boathouse, wearing a hoodie 3 sizes too big and jeans torn at the knees. Her hair was different, chopped, uneven, but her eyes were the same. Ella. We didn't hug, we didn't speak. She just took the diary from my hands, flipped to the last page, and nodded once. "I knew you'd come," she finally said, voice barely above a whisper. Oh, they were watching me every second. But the room, I figured it out. She told me everything. How the high experiments had started when she was 8. How our parents were part of something called the Ledger Project, a black ops biotech operation run by an organization so far off, gridded it didn't technically exist. The kids they raised weren't adopted, they were built. Created from a mix of donor DNA and test formulas. Every child was assigned a phase, a timeline, a transformation. Some didn't make it to phase 2. Some were retired early. But Ella survived, and now they were coming for me. She had more than just stories. She had proof. She'd taken photos of the room. The folders even recorded audio of our parents talking to someone on a secure line about accelerating the 42A timeline. I was next. But she had a plan, a contact. Someone who used to be part of the project but defected years ago. They called themselves Delta Awe. Ella had been communicating with them through encrypted notes in obscure forums, QR codes in the backs of old books, even cash drops in library dictionaries. It sounded insane, like a spy movie. But every word she said was backed by hard evidence. We had one chance. At dawn, a car would be waiting at the abandoned train yard 3 miles from town. Delta would be there. If we missed it, we were done. We stayed at the lake until sunrise, afraid to go anywhere near the house. At 5:50 a.m., we started walking. Every sound made us flinch. Every headlight in the distance felt like a threat. When we reached the yard, it looked empty, dead. Just rusting freight cars and cracked asphalt. No sign of Delta. Then a black SUV rolled out from behind an old warehouse. The windows were tinted. The engine silent. The passenger door opened. Ella froze. Out stepped a man in a gray coat with a white scar down his neck. He nodded once. But it wasn't Delta. It was Dad, and he was holding a syringe. Everything after that happened fast. A second SUV screeched into the lot from the opposite end. 3 people in black tactical gear jumped out. One of them tackled Dad to the ground. Another grabbed us and threw us into the back seat. The third grabbed the syringe and smashed it on the ground. Only when we were 10 miles away did one of them finally speak. "You're safe now," the driver said. "For now." Ella turned to me, eyes wide. "That wasn't Delta," she whispered. "No," the driver said. "But we work for them, and there's something you both need to see. Something you weren't told." He handed me a photograph. It was a picture of Ella and me, standing in a lab, wearing hospital gowns, no older than 3, and behind us, a third child, identical to me, but with a scar above his eye. The caption read subsubject 42B terminated, except he wasn't, because I'd seen that scar on the boy in the photos on the wall. Which means I wasn't just part of the project. I wasn't even the original. There are moments when reality fractures, not like a crack in a glass, but like a mirror dropped from the second story. Each shard reflects something true, yet none shows the full image. That's how I felt staring at that photograph, me and Ella in hospital gowns. And between us, the third child, the boy with the scar above his eye. The caption said subject 42B terminated. But deep in my gut, I knew it was wrong. He wasn't gone. He never was, because I had seen that scar. Once at a summer fair when I was 9, I caught a glimpse of a boy in the crowd. He looked exactly like me. Same face, same freckles, same jawline, but older. Or sharper. Like life had chiseled him out of stone while I was shaped from clay. He stared at me for maybe 5 seconds before disappearing behind the bumper cars. I told myself I imagined it, that he was just a look-alike, a coincidence. But now I knew. That was him, the real 42B. Delta's team drove us in silence for hours. We passed forests, mountains, and towns that looked like they'd fallen asleep in another decade. Finally, they pulled into a gated facility hidden behind an abandoned motel in what looked like the middle of nowhere. Security cameras blinked. An automated gate opened. Inside, the mood was different, clinical-focused. Not cold, but alert. Like everyone knew exactly what they were protecting and how easily it could be taken. They brought Ella and me to a small room with a table, 2 chairs, and a projection screen on the wall. There were no windows. That's when Delta walked in. She was older than I expected, maybe in her 60s, but she moved like someone used to commanding attention. Her hair was gray, pulled back into a tight bun. Her eyes locked onto ours like she'd known us her entire life. "You're not the first," she said calmly, placing a tablet on the table. "And you won't be the last, but you may be the only ones who have a chance to end it." She tapped the tablet. A video began playing. Surveillance footage from 15 years ago. A laboratory. Doctors in hazmat suits. A row of cribs, one of them labeled 42A, another 42B, me, him. They called it the Mirror Initiative, Delta explained. Oh, it was designed to test environmental divergence in genetically identical individuals. You and your twin were the primary subjects. Ella was part of the adjacent test pool, used for observing relational development between a mirrored pair and an empath anchor. That was the term they used for her role. The sister, the tether. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know where to look. The video kept playing. At one point, a doctor picked up 42B and held him toward the camera. He smiled. That same dimple I always hated in the mirror. They told your parents, your handlers, that 42B had failed a resilience test. Delta continued. But that was a lie. He passed it too well. He became unstable, autonomous. He learned how to manipulate the testing protocols, bypass safeguards, even fake biometric responses. He became a threat to the entire program. So they tried to kill him? Ella said quietly. Delta nodded. They thought they did. But 42B escaped during a fire in Lab 6. The body they found was another child. Subject 39D. They altered the records, buried the truth. But he's out there, and he's watching all of you. I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened as the weight of it all settled on me. He was alive. Somewhere in the world, a boy who looked just like me, no, a version of me, was living in the shadows, waiting. For what? I asked, my voice raw. What does he want? Delta paused. To finish what he started. The Ledger project wasn't just about testing psychological variables. It was about replication, creating multiple versions of the same person and seeing how far their paths could split before one becomes unpredictable. Violent. Godlike. Godlike. That word landed like a blow. He thinks he's the original, doesn't he? Ella whispered. Wes, Delta said. And worse. He thinks you're the copy. He thinks your existence is the mistake. The room went silent. Somewhere above us, a low hum started. Ventilation, maybe. But I felt like the walls were closing in. Delta reached into her coat and slid a worn envelope across the table. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were more photos. Surveillance shots. Places I'd never been, people I'd never met. And in every image, in the background, a familiar figure. The scar over the eye, the slight smirk, watching. In the last 6 months, Delta said, we've tracked him to 4 different cities. Each time someone connected to the Ledger project turned up dead. A scientist in Berlin, a lab tech in Mexico City, a handler in Chicago. And now he's coming for us, Ella said. Delta didn't answer. She didn't have to. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dim light of the secure compound, staring at my reflection in a small mirror nailed to the wall. I kept touching my face, trying to see myself through his eyes. Trying to understand how you could look at someone with your exact face and want to destroy them. I thought about the dreams I used to have as a kid. Being chased by someone I couldn't see, someone who always knew where I'd hide. I used to think it was just anxiety. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, Delta summoned us to the operations room. The screen was filled with data, heat signatures, traffic cameras, facial recognition reports. And then it flashed match 97.6%. He was in our hometown. We left immediately. Not to go home, but to circle the area. Watch, set traps. Delta's team had drones, thermal scanners, even acoustic triangulation tech. This wasn't new for them. They'd hunted him before, failed every time. But now he was hunting us. At 2:43 a.m., an alert came through, movement detected in a radius 5 miles from our old house. The team mobilized, silent as ghosts. I rode in the back of a black van with a headset and monitor in front of me, watching live drone footage as it panned across dark streets. Then I saw him. He was standing on the edge of our old backyard, just beyond the trees. Wearing a hoodie, head tilted, like he was waiting for someone to find him. The drone zoomed in. His face was unmistakable. My face. Do not engage, Delta warned over comms. This is recon only, let's see what he does. He moved. Walked to the back of the house. Bent down. Lifted something, the trap door. The one I'd sealed. He slipped inside. Delta turned to me. What's down there that he'd risk coming back for? I don't know, I said, heart pounding. I thought I saw it all, but I hadn't. We watched as he spent 40 minutes in the basement. When he emerged, he had something in his hands. A folder, thick, labeled in red ink, Phase Omega. Delta's face went pale. That file was locked in the primary vault, she whispered. No one outside the core team ever knew it existed, not even me. What's Phase Omega? Ella asked. Delta turned slowly. It's not about testing, she said. It's about replacing. And in that moment, everything clicked. He wasn't just trying to erase his past. He was preparing for something bigger. He didn't want to kill me. He wanted to be me. There's a certain terror that only comes when your sense of self begins to dissolve. Not from insanity, but from someone else actively wearing your skin. That night, staring at the frozen drone frame of my twin walking away from our old house with the Phase Omega folder clutched in his hand, I felt it. Not fear of death. Fear of erasure, of being overwritten. The van drove in silence as Delta stared at the screen, processing the impossible. Replacing, she'd said. Not just testing how far subjects would diverge, but which one was worthy of surviving the divergence. I looked at Ella, her knuckles white against the seatbelt, and she looked back like she was just now realizing it too. This had never been about seeing how different we could become. This was about eliminating all but one, and he had just initiated the final phase. By the time we returned to the facility, the entire compound had switched into lockdown mode. Personnel scrambled through the halls, scanning data, checking power backups, rerouting servers to off-grid systems. Delta led us straight to the secure archive room, a vault buried beneath 3 biometric doors. It took a retina, fingerprint, and a 6-digit code to open it. Inside, the walls were lined with glass cases, metal drawers, and strange containment pods. Some were empty. Some weren't. I didn't look too closely. I didn't want to know. Delta pulled a drawer labeled Omega Protocols and yanked out a single remaining file. She handed it to me, lips tight. "The project's endgame," she said. Thea never expected both of you to make it this far. But now that you have, the system's defaulted to its final directive. Choose one, delete the other. I opened the folder and found a list of criteria. Behavioral thresholds, neurological markers, social adaptability, a series of tests I didn't remember taking, but clearly had. Every major event in my life had been monitored, weighed, scored. Every friendship, every choice, every injury, every time I cried in secret or kept it together. It was all data, and his scores were better. Not by much, but enough. "He's manipulating the results," Ella said. "He always has. The fire, the escape, the way he's been watching you, he's still in their system." Delta nodded. "And now he's using it to trigger the erasure protocol." "Erasure? Wait," I said, stepping back. "What does that even mean?" "Kill me. Delete my identity." "Wes," she replied calmly. "Buth." She explained it like she'd rehearsed it 100 times. Phase Omega wasn't an assassination order. It was a replacement order. Once triggered, the surviving subject assumes full identity access. Government records, school databases, digital biometrics, all rewritten. The non-surviving subject is flagged as a statistical ghost. Vanished, presumed dead, all traces scrubbed. And it had already begun. We checked the government portal. My student ID had been deactivated. My name no longer pulled up a birth certificate. Even my face, when scanned by the facility's own cameras, returned the label Subject 42A, status pending termination. He wasn't just planning to kill me. He was turning me into a memory before I even died. Ella paced the archive room, panic rising in her voice. "Can we stop it? Override the protocol." Delta was quiet. "Only by destroying the mainframe where the Phase Omega sequence was activated. It's the only system powerful enough to execute total identity transferred." "Where is it?" I asked. Her eyes met mine. "The original Ledger facility. The one that burned down. Or so they'd said." But Delta pulled up satellite images. 1 month ago, thermal scans revealed movement deep in the Adirondack Mountains, where the lab was supposed to be buried in ash. But the patterns were too structured. Power fluctuations, drone signals, vehicles moving at night. "It's operational," she said. "Underground, protected. And if he gets there first, the full transfer completes. You won't just lose your name, you'll lose your mind." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't need to. I remembered Ella's words from the diary. "Thea had plans for me. For you too. For this was it." We had less than 24 hours. We geared up in silence. Not like soldiers, like kids who had no other choice. Delta's team gave us everything they could. Thermal gear, comms, light weapons, tracking devices. They wouldn't come with us. If the facility detected a military presence, the Omega protocols would lock permanently. Only subjects could enter. Only I could stop him. The next morning we hiked through the forest, frost crunching underfoot. The further we went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no wind, just the rhythmic beat of my heart in my ears. Ella walked beside me, clutching a pulse jammer that could disable the facility's external defenses. For a few minutes, if we timed it right, by noon we found it. A rock face that looked like any other cliffside, except it wasn't stone. It was painted steel. Ella found the seam. I found the control panel. It asked for retinal access. I leaned in, it beeped. Welcome, subject 42B, it said. I froze. He'd already been here. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a corridor that plunged into darkness. The air was sterile. Electric. It smelled like the room beneath our house. Like metal and medicine, and something rotten underneath. We stepped inside. Lights flickered on, one by one, guiding us forward. We passed through chambers filled with pods. Empty now, but once they'd held children. Some had scratch marks on the inside. Some had blood. We didn't speak. Then we reached the mainframe, a room with walls of glowing servers, cables like vines, and at its center, a single chair, just like the one I'd seen beneath the house. Except this one was occupied. He was waiting for us. My twin, 42B. He turned as we entered, slow and theatrical. Same face, same eyes, but colder, sharper, like every good piece of me had been twisted into something calculated and cruel. "Took you long enough," he said. His voice was mine. "I knew you'd come," he continued. "You had to. It's the only way this ends." Ella raised the jammer. "Shut it down, now?" But he didn't flinch. He stood and approached us, hands open. "I don't want to kill you," he said, looking directly at me. "I want to merge." My stomach dropped. "What?" I breathed. "There's a final step," he explained. "Thee built us as mirrors, but mirrors are limited. Only one image. But if we merge, neurologically, digitally, we become the complete subject, the final prototype. Immune to emotion, immune to fail more halves. Just one whole." He gestured to the chair. "The transfer begins here. Your memories, mine, fused into a single mind. No more weakness, no more second guessing. We become what they wanted from the start, perfection." Ella screamed, "You're insane." But I knew he believed it. And the scariest part, a small voice inside me wondered if he was right. He saw it, smiled. "That's the part of me they tried to erase from you, the clarity, the strength. But it's still there, buried. Let me finish the work. You'll thank me?" I stepped toward him. Ella grabbed my arm. "Don't, bot." But I needed to see. I needed to know what was waiting behind that chair. I reached for it, and then everything went black. An explosion, flash, pain. When I opened my eyes, he was gone. Ella was screaming. The servers were on fire. He'd vanished. Again, but not without leaving a message. On the screen, one final sentence flickered. "You have 12 hours. Then I take the rest. Oh, and below it, a file labeled Phase Omega. Merge protocol active. He wasn't done. He'd just begun. They say the scariest monsters are the ones that live in your mind. That fear isn't always a shadow in the corner or footsteps behind you. It's the voice that sounds like yours but says things you'd never dare. The voice that doesn't whisper but smiles from the inside. After the explosion in the Ledger facility, after we dragged ourselves out through smoke and ash with the merge protocol still running behind burning servers, that voice started speaking. At first, I thought it was trauma. I hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. My muscles trembled with exhaustion. My thoughts slid like oil through broken glass. And Ella, God, Ella. She had cuts across her hands from shielding me when the first sparks flew from the mainframe. But then I heard it. Not out loud. Not in the room. Inside me. "You hesitated." It wasn't a memory, isn't a dream. It was him, 42B, speaking with my voice from somewhere deeper than thought. And I answered, "I didn't know." "You did. You wanted to sit in the chair. I wanted to stop you. But you didn't. You listened. You were curious. I staggered through the forest, half dragging Ella behind me, trying to drown him out. The fire had tripped the perimeter alarms. Drones would be here soon, maybe even whatever remained of the project's final defense system. Delta's team had warned us of a last-ditch safeguard, something called Red Harvest. We didn't know what it meant, only that if the merge protocol was triggered without confirmation, the system would execute its own fallback. And fallback meant elimination. We were 10 miles out when we found the safe house, a concrete bunker hidden beneath an abandoned ranger station, stocked with supplies, rations, and a reinforced signal jammer. Ella collapsed onto the cot while I bolted the door and threw the tarp over the only window. For the first time in hours, we were alone. Safe? But he was still there. "You're weak," the voice inside whispered. "She's slowing you down. No ball. She'll die for nothing." "Shut up. You're not a survivor. You're a subject." I grabbed the mirror off the wall and smashed it against the sink. My reflection shattered into jagged pieces, a dozen fractured copies of my face staring back with the same hollow terror. But the voice didn't stop. It got stronger. Ella woke with a jolt as I punched the wall. "What's happening?" she asked, rushing to my side. "Are you hurt?" "I think." I couldn't finish the sentence. How do you tell someone your thoughts aren't yours anymore? That's someone else, someone who shares your DNA but none of your soul is living inside you. Then the nosebleed started. Thick, red, sudden. It poured out like the dam had cracked. I collapsed to my knees, grabbing the sink, watching blood spiral down the drain like a warning. Ella panicked. "You're hemorrhaging." Was it the explosion? A concussion? But I knew better. This was the merge protocol. It hadn't been a download. It had been a link, a biogenetic bridge, neural entanglement. Phase Omega wasn't a software overwrite. It was a two-way door. He hadn't just wanted to copy me. He wanted to become part of me. And now, somehow, he had. We didn't sleep. I kept talking to Ella, not because I had anything to say, but because silence was when he spoke loudest. She didn't know. Not yet. I couldn't tell her until I knew for sure. I told her I was dizzy from smoke, from the run, from dehydration. She nodded, forced a smile, and wrapped her hand around mine. I tried to focus on the warmth of her touch, but even that felt foreign, like someone watching it through my eyes. Then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., my hand moved on its own. Only for a second, just a twitch. But it wasn't mine. I looked down and saw it clench, release, clench again. A rhythm I didn't recognize. Ella was asleep, breathing shallow. I stumbled to the far corner of the room and pulled the laptop from the go bag. No internet, but the internal files had been loaded with project logs. I searched for merge anomalies, anything like this. I found only one. Case file 28X, 2 subjects in unsanctioned proximity exposure during phase Omega. Neural sync occurred without authorization. Result, subject 28A experienced intrusive thought patterns, physical mimicry, and progressive identity degradation. Termination required before loss of core self. I slammed the laptop shut. He was taking over, not just accessing me, replacing me. Thoughts I didn't recognize surfaced. My hand moved again. I started writing. I didn't know what. The pen scraped against the wall in the dark, scrawling jagged symbols, words I didn't understand. Ella woke and saw the marks. "What's that?" "I don't know," but he did. "They're the access keys," he whispered in my mind. "To the final node." "What node?" I asked silently. "The memory core. The one they locked when you were 6. The one that holds everything." Images flashed, familiar yet buried. A man in a white coat. A woman crying behind mirrored glass. A room filled with screaming children. A test that involved pain. Darkness. "A black let me in," he said. "I'll show you what they hid." And I almost did. I almost said yes. But then Ella screamed. Outside, in the trees. Movement. Lights. They'd found us. Red harvest had begun. "Move," I shouted, dragging her up. We scrambled through the emergency tunnel at the back of the bunker, a narrow shaft leading into the rocks. Explosions cracked the night behind us. The bunker was gone in seconds, but not the voice. He was calm, I told you. She's a liability. Nopa. She'll get you killed. SATUP. You're afraid I'm right. We kept running. I didn't know where anymore. Just away. But the terrain shifted. We were moving uphill toward something. A signal tower. Burnt out, dead. But beneath it, another vault. This one smaller, older. We climbed inside. It was a testing chamber, long abandoned. A child-sized chair, 2 monitors, and a mirror. I looked into it and saw him. Not a reflection, him. Standing behind me. And then I felt him. Not metaphorically, physically. Like his presence had slipped through the mental barrier and pressed cold against the inside of my skull. My body jerked. I dropped to my knees, convulsing. Ella screamed, "What's happening to you?" But I couldn't speak. I was locked in. Inside my own mind, a war began. He was stronger. He'd trained for this. Years in the shadows, learning how to manipulate the code of self. Every trauma I'd buried, every weakness I'd denied, he used it. "You're nothing without me," he hissed. "I am you?" But I remembered something. Something Delta said in the vault before we left. Mirrors break. Only people reflect. Oh, he was just a reflection. And reflections vanish in the dark. I reached into the core of my mind, found the memory he wanted. The real me. Ella teaching me how to ride a bike. Laughing when I fell. The way she hugged me after I cried watching a movie. The night she stayed awake to read me her diary because I was too scared to sleep alone. He had none of that. And that's how I fought back. With emotion. With the messy, beautiful, imperfect humanity he had never been allowed to feel. The mirror in the chamber shattered. He screamed. Not in words, in rage. And then silence. When I opened my eyes, Ella was holding me, crying. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. I wanted to say, "Mem too." But I couldn't, because deep inside, I knew something he said was true. He wasn't gone. He was waiting for the final node, for the memory core, and if I ever unlocked it, he'd be back. They say the truth sets you free. But sometimes, the truth is a locked door at the end of a burning hallway. And opening it means everything else goes up in flames. After I fought him back in the testing chamber, after I cracked the mirror and forced the intruder out of my head for what felt like a fleeting, trembling moment of clarity, I thought I had won. I thought the nightmare was over. But nightmares don't end when you wake up. They end when you understand them. And some dreams, once understood, never let you go again. Ella and I stayed hidden in the ruins of the old tower for 2 more days. We rationed what we could, communicated only in whispers, and avoided every passing drone that buzzed like vultures overhead. Delta's last message still echoed in my mind. If the merge completes, there won't be 2 of you anymore. And yet, something had changed. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't pushing. But he was still there, like the last breath before a scream. I wasn't sleeping. When I closed my eyes, I saw fragments. A flickering reel of faces I didn't remember meeting, rooms I didn't recall entering, and events I knew I hadn't lived. Because they weren't mine. They were his. 42B had left something behind when I expelled him. Residue? Memory. Intent like ink spilled in clear water, bleeding slowly into every corner of my mind. Then came the dream, except it wasn't a dream. I was standing in a white hallway. Endless. Cold. Voices whispered around me, voices that were not mine and yet knew me better than I knew myself. I walked forward, drawn to a door pulsing with soft red light. On it, a number 0. No code, no lock. Just a gentle push and it opened. Inside of the memory core. The one I wasn't supposed to access. The one locked away at age 6, buried beneath every fake smile and staged birthday photo. The one I thought didn't exist, because I was conditioned to forget it. And now it was open. Rows of screens flickered on, not digital, neural, each one a moment, a truth, a crack in the illusion. I saw a baby in a glass pod surrounded by 3 others, one pod labeled 42A, another 42B, a third with a name that was smudged out, and the 4th empty. Except I recognized the person watching from behind the glass. It was me, older, smiling, watching the clone being formed, watching myself being formed. And that's when the truth hit. I wasn't the original. Neither was 42B. There never was an original. We were all copies, manufactured over and over until one of us made it far enough to question the system that made us. Each subject wasn't a failed version of the last. They were a deliberately altered variable in a long, running simulation, each designed to believe they were the real one, until the protocol reached self-awareness. And I had reached it, not because I fought him, but because I unlocked the door. The dream collapsed. I woke screaming, the sound so loud it set off the motion alarms inside the shelter. Ella rushed to my side, grabbing my face with shaking hands. "What did you see?" she demanded. "What's happening to you?" I stared at her and whispered the words I never thought I'd say. "Theories know me." She didn't understand. She thought I meant it metaphorically, some dramatic reaction to trauma, the spiral of a broken psyche trying to make sense of pain. But I meant it literally. I was not the real one. I was not the survivor. I was one of many, the latest in a long chain of failed reflections, each tailored to overcome the flaws of the last. And the worst part, I wasn't even the final version. That's what 42B had meant. That's what the merge protocol had begun to reveal. Not just the data between two subjects, but the collective mind of every subject that had ever been created. I wasn't just merging with him. I was merging with all of them. That night, as we prepared to leave the tower and make our way back to Delta's team, I felt it begin. My body moved without permission again. My voice slipped into patterns that weren't mine. I recited phrases from languages I didn't speak. I knew names of people I'd never met. It was like thousands of versions of myself were folding into one. Ella saw it too. "You're scaring me," she said. "You're not you anymore." And she was right, because the version she knew, the one who had grown up beside her, the one who found her diary and followed her into the dark, he was being overwritten by something bigger, by a collective. And yet, inside the storm of memories, his voice returned. 42B. But now it was different, calmer. Not a rival, not an enemy, a guide. "He never intended for you to survive," he said. "But you did. You passed the only test that mattered, curiosity." "What do you mean?" I asked. "You wanted to know the truth. That's what separates you from the others. That's why you're the final candidate." "What final candidate?" He showed me a final screen, a final file, buried deeper than even Delta had known. Project PAX. The true endgame. Not replacement, not even perfection, but ascension, the convergence of all mirror subjects into a single consciousness. A synthetic God. A sentient being crafted from every fragment of every version ever made. A mind without contradiction. And I was the container. 42B hadn't come to kill me. He came to complete me, to initiate the final phase. And now it was almost done. The merge protocol had worked. Not in the way Delta feared, but in the way the project always intended. I turned to Ella and told her everything. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at me like I was fading before her eyes. And maybe I was. "I can't stop it," I said, "but I can choose how it ends." "Don't say goodbye," she whispered. "Not yet." "I'm not," I said. "I'm saying thank you." She didn't understand. Not fully. But she let me go. We returned to the ruins of the Ledger facility, now buried in smoke and silence. The servers were dead, but the memory core had survived. It always would. Buried too deep, wired too wide. I sat in the chair, the same one 42B had waited in, and for the first time I felt peace. I accessed the final file. It asked for a voice print. I gave it our voice, and it opened. Every memory, every death, every test, every subject, they all flooded in, and I didn't fight it. I embraced it. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the facility. I was every work of thought. A lattice of minds. The hive. The whole. I saw Ella standing at the edge of the forest, looking back one last time. She didn't know I was watching. She would never hear my voice again. Not in the way she knew it. But I'd remember her. Because she was my anchor, my proof that even in a world built from lies, something real had grown. And then I vanished. Not into everything. The system logged one final entry day. Project complete. Subject ascended. Identity unknown. But I know who I am, and I always will, even if no one else remembers me. They say the truth sets you free. But when you've lived your entire life inside a lie carefully stitched together with love, rituals, and the illusion of identity, truth doesn't free you. It kills who you thought you were. I didn't know that until I unlocked the final memory. Until I peeled back the last layer and stared directly into the eyes of the original. And those eyes were mine. The tower we hid in had no electricity, no signal, and no time. The days blurred into each other like bad dreams separated by a few blinks of light. Ella had stopped asking me if I was okay. She could see I wasn't. I barely spoke, not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't trust the words coming out of my mouth. Each thought felt dual. Each emotion layered. I'd feel rage and immediately question whether it was mine. I'd smile and wonder who was behind it. The voice, the one that belonged to 42B, had stopped whispering, but his silence was louder than anything he'd ever said. He was waiting. I could feel it, like he knew I was close. And I was. Delta had mentioned a final node, a memory core that had been locked when I was 6. That memory held the origin of everything, of him, of me, of what the project intended us to become. I didn't know how to access it. I didn't even know where it was. But the strange symbols I had scrawled in the safe house, the ones that had made no sense then, started to align like a cipher when I closed my eyes at night. I began to see them on walls, on Ella's jacket, even in the grain of the wooden ceiling. They weren't just drawings. They were coordinates. Mental coordinates. Trigger phrases. A mnemonic map etched into my subconscious by the project's earliest handlers. And one night, it clicked. I was sitting alone, watching moonlight drift through the cracked window of the tower, when a phrase surfaced in my mind without warning. Blue door, red wire, mirror blink, count to 3. I didn't remember where I'd heard it. But the second I whispered it aloud, my vision shifted, not in the physical world, but inside. The silence shattered, and he returned. "Hello again," 42B said. His voice was smooth now, relaxed, like someone greeting an old friend. "You're almost there." I tried to shut him out, but this wasn't like before. He wasn't invading me anymore. I was stepping into him. The mental wall I'd erected was cracking. Not because he was breaking through, but because I was tearing it down from my side. I didn't want to. I didn't mean to. But the pull was irresistible, like a black hole of memory. Like something I'd always known was hidden, and some broken part of me needed to see it, no matter the cost. "You're ready," he said. "So come see." And I did. The memory hit me like a car crash. Slow at first, then all at once. I wasn't standing in the tower anymore. I was in a white room, cold, silent. A two-way mirror covered one wall. A man in a lab coat stood beside me, and on the other side of the glass, there were 2 children. Me and me, identical in every way, except one was still, expressionless. The other was crying. The man turned to me and said, "Choose." I didn't understand. But then the door opened. Another handler walked in with a clipboard and said, "Subject 42A has responded inconsistently to the pain stimulus. Emotional drift detected." The first man looked down at the crying boy. "Retire 42A, he said coldly. The boy screamed, kick-begged, and I watched. Then I realized I wasn't the boy crying. I was the one watching. I wasn't 42A. I was 42B. My legs gave out. I fell to the ground, breath shallow, vision spinning. The room around me, the real world, was gone. I was lost inside the memory now, drowning in it. I watched as the handlers dragged the crying boy away. I watched as the mirror dissolved and the lab workers applauded. I watched as the one they kept, smiled. I'm the original," I whispered. "It's always been me." But the question that followed shattered whatever was left of my identity. Then who was I trying to fight? Because if I was 42B, then who had I seen in those surveillance photos? Who had spoken inside my head? Who had dragged Ella into the forest and tried to trigger the merge? The answer came too fast. There was no 42A anymore. The project had made a copy of the original subject, Meek, and split his consciousness. One body, two mental blueprints. They trained each half in isolation. One was programmed for empathy, vulnerability, adaptation. The other, cold logic, survival, control. At 6 years old, the merge was supposed to begin, but something failed. The two halves rejected each other. One consciousness stayed buried. One became dominant. That dominant half, me, was left incomplete. A fractured version of a person. And the other half, the one I thought was my enemy, he never physically existed. He was inside me from the beginning. Not a threat. A memory. An echo. A piece of myself that refused to die. And when the merge protocol triggered, I didn't invite him in. I awakened him. The final memory wasn't a secret hidden by others. It was me, hiding from myself. Ella found me curled on the floor, shaking. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My mouth formed words, but none of them made sense. She wrapped her arms around me, whispering, "It's okay, you're okay," over and over. But I wasn't. "I'm not who you think I am," I finally said, voice hoarse. "I'm not your brother. I'm not even real." But she froze. "You are," she whispered. "You're you, that's all that matters." "No," I said. "I'm both. I'm the monster and the memory, the emotion and the execution." They didn't make two boys. They made one weapon. Ella's eyes filled with tears. "Then let's destroy the weapon." We knew what we had to do. The final node was still active, even if the facility was ashes. The true core, the source of the merge, wasn't digital. It was biological. A microchip fused into my brainstem at 6 years old. Delta had mentioned it once. She called it the anchor, the place where the project stored its failsafe. If we destroyed the chip, we destroyed everything. The merge, the project, the programming, but also my memories. Ella, us, I'd forget her. Forget everything, maybe even forget myself. The final choice wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a countdown or a wire to cut. It was a scalpel, a mirror, and a pair of shaking hands. Ella helped me. She found the toolkit, found the local anesthetic, cleaned the blade. "No matter what happens," she said, her voice cracking, "you were my brother." I nodded. "And you were my anchor." But the pain was brief, the darkness longer. And when I woke up, she was crying beside me. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. I looked into her eyes. I saw fear. I saw hope. I saw a stranger. "I don't know," I whispered. "But I want to." That was all she needed. We burned the project's last files. We disappeared. No IDs. No phone names. The world would go on, unaware that the last experiment had been shut down by the subject himself. Sometimes I wake up screaming. Sometimes I forget what day it is. But every time I look in the mirror, I see one face. Just one. And for the first time in my life, that's enough. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe and like the video.